when I get to that place, I'm like, you know what? What's here and now in your body in this moment? Because the body doesn't differentiate between real or imagined, nor does it differentiate around time. So if something happened to you and you were 2 years old, that's always ever present.
That's Molly Mitchell Hardt, and this is the Powerful Ladies Podcast. Hey guys, I'm Cara Duffy, a business coach and entrepreneur on a mission to help you live your most extraordinary life and make the impact you want by showing you anything is possible. People who have mastered freedom, ease, and success, who are living their best and most ridiculous lives, and who are changing the world are often people you've never heard of until now. As we look deeper into our modern society and our modern habits don't serve us or align with what we're committed to, a huge, massive void is how we view, approach, appreciate, prepare, support, and honestly, all the things regarding motherhood. Today's guest, Molly Mitchell Hardt, has stepped in to repair the journey of motherhood, how it's approached, and most importantly, to support women in their motherhood experience. Whether you are a mother or not, this episode will highlight how much of our life, society, policies, and simply our way of being needs to be looked at again, because motherhood literally touches everything. And Molly knows, being a mother herself and a therapist, she has daily exposure to the impact the mother character has on all of us. I look forward to hearing your aha moments. I had so many from this episode, but in the meantime, enjoy our conversation. Well, welcome to the Powerful Ladies Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
I'm very excited to talk to you today. You were referred by Anna, who's on our team, and she has like the coolest people in her circle. So every time she's like, oh, can I recommend someone? I'm like, yes, please, because whomever they are, they're awesome. How do you know Anna?
Oh, wow. We go back a ways, probably a decade now, which is crazy. We met through a mutual friend and then lived together for a short time. And in that time, we were both in such a, kind of coming of age moment, early 20s, figuring out like who we are and what we wanted. And we just really bonded in that space and created this sort of foundation for a deep, deep friendship that has evolved so much over time. And, she's one of those people who I can connect with, whenever, and we just kind of go really deep. So, yeah.
Yeah, she's awesome. Let's tell everyone your name, where you are in the world, and what you're up to.
Yeah. So my name's Molly Mitchell Hardt. I'm in Venice, California. And I've always been one who's doing lots of things at once. So my main two areas, I guess three, are my private psychotherapy practice, and the Sacred Journey of Motherhood, which is a company that I co-founded with a friend and fellow mama, Becky Whitmore. And it's really about bringing motherhood back into the sacred container in, many different forms. And I can, talk more about that later. And then, my third big box is family and motherhood.
How many kids do you have?
One. Yeah.
How old are they?
He is turning 3 in April. Yeah. And I've just now started to sleep for longer stretches than 2 hours. So it's very exciting.
Yes. There is a comedian that a friend quoted recently to just say over and over again, my son is 2 and he's cried every day. He's cried every day for 2 years. I didn't know it was possible for someone to cry every day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot. A lot of everything.
Oh, yes. And you're probably getting into that really fun place of all the questions, which I think are to me, I wish they had more shows about like kids just saying what kids say.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think part of why I want to be a mother is just to overhear their conversations and to field their questions, because they're enlightening, they're hilarious. And my favorite jokes are about loss in translation, which kids excel at in their young ages.
It's like constant hilarity. That's for sure. And
Yeah.
his new thing is just asking why to everything. And so I'm like, wow, I'm like really, like I got to be on it. I'm like, okay, why is the sky blue? Okay, good question. Let me let me dig deep for that.
We're going to have to ask Uncle Google. Hold on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'd love to start at the beginning of your kind of three-part path of, being a therapist or a psychotherapist, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So how did you decide that that was a fit for you? And what has that journey been like so far?
Hmm. When I really look back, I realize it was sort of a golden thread woven through,
Mm-hmm.
the fabric of my whole life. Because I was always so curious about, my own behavior, the behavior of those around me, like the why question, Um, and I remember I had like a class in high school on psychology, and I was like, okay, there's something, so it sparked something for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of coincided with, um, my first musings in the kind of Eastern philosophy realm. And so I ended up going, my own kind of journey of self-discovery and awakening started in the path of yoga. I did get my undergrad in psychology, but that was actually like a really deadening experience. And I was like, if this is what it is, I don't like it. But it wasn't until I found the institute that I got my master's at that I was like, okay, this is home. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
arrived. This is it. And so yeah, when I found Pacifica, it's called Pacifica Graduate Institute. It did feel like a homecoming, like it was like a Hogwarts of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
After about 10 years of teaching yoga, I had the sense that I really wanted to deepen with people,
Mm-hmm.
to really have a experience of like greater depth, one-on-one and, in groups, but really focusing in on, the deeper layers that like, you could feel in the room in a yoga class, but maybe not necessarily, it's not so explicit. So it felt like kind of finishing what I had started,
Mm-hmm.
as far as where my interests were. Yeah. And the second part of the question was like, how is it going?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny. It's definitely a calling. It has been a
Yeah.
calling. And so was teaching yoga, but the difference is that I think being a therapist for me is a much better fit for my like typology and personality. And I just love what I do. Like I am so grateful every day for what I do. It fills me up and gives me energy and so much purpose and meaning. So I'd say it's going pretty well
Yeah.
overall.
Do you have a specialty that you focus in?
Yeah. So I kind of like play in two main realms. One is sort of the container of depth psychotherapy, which encompasses Jungian psychology and the importance of myth and story, the importance of ritual, and the realm of the unconscious and shadow. And then the other big box is the somatic realm. So really focusing in on trauma resolution and the relationship with the body. And I found without both sort of the narrative and the cognitive and the somatic, in my own experience of healing, it was just sort of like there was a disconnect and it just wasn't quite complete. So those two elements have really become really, really powerful for me. Oh, what I was going to say about the depth is also the realm of archetypes. I've always been after like searching for what's underneath everything, like what I've always been sort of seeking what's the deepest truth I can find. And so for me, where I've landed is in the realm of the physiology and in the realms of depth psychology, because it just feels like it's sort of the root system underneath everything.
I think it's so fascinating how much crossover there is between psychotherapy and yoga. And I first started seeing this alignment when I had a coach who was a therapist left practicing so she could be just a coach. So she could bring in other modalities, whether it was Reiki or yoga or essential oils or food or something else, like help people have breakthroughs that she couldn't in the licensed space. And then I had another client who created what's called the first ever psychotherapeutic yoga teacher training, which I got to take, which was amazing. And it brings together yoga, psychology, and neurobiology. And because she was a therapist who started partnering with yoga teachers to have breakthroughs with her clients. And she's like, hold on, like there's a clear connection here. How do we put all this together? So I think it's so interesting to then meet you, who went from yoga into therapy and like being able to see those two spaces. Do you ever feel in conflict that you can't, like that you're in the license box, like helping people as a therapist?
Totally. I mean, it's definitely, it's sort of, we're in such an interesting space. I know from my astrologist friends that like we've been in this big transformation around Capricorn, and you can kind of feel it. All the structures are kind of like starting to crumble and just feel so freaking archaic, So I kind of feel that way about the license. The flip side of that is that it's also very containing, and it has this nice like trodden road that like, okay, I take these steps forward, and that's like comforting. And then there's like the credibility part, but there's also the sense of, I think, people coming up like millennials and younger that are just like, get me out of these boxes, they don't want to have to like do this kind of thing. So I feel that. And what I'd say is like, we joke, especially my friends who, my colleagues who went to Pacifica as well, because we're all, more in the realm of like the spiritual and, connect with the archetypes of like the wounded healer and the witch and the shaman and, these kind of archetypes that we embody and that move through us. And what's kind of nice about being in that psychotherapist box is that I think it's kind of accessible for people. It's like, oh, okay, I think I know what I'm doing and getting, and then like we joke, we're like, in there and we're like, little do they know, like there's this really deep process going on that, that they're welcome into. And like, if they're not quite ready to feel the full depth and breadth of it, that's okay too. Like we can operate in that like psychotherapist and client space, and that's enough too.
I make the same joke about when new coaching business clients come to me, because they'll come and the people call you and they call me because they have a problem. The problem is always the symptom, not the issue, right? So I always find it so entertaining, the same thing of like, whatever they show up with, I'm like, that's cute. Yep, I'll put it down. We'll fix that. But I know that there's like 15 layers below that we really got to fix. Otherwise, the rest isn't going to work.
Totally.
And so I find that amusing. Like it's a game I get to play with myself, almost like, here's what I bet the problem is. We'll go figure it out. And I give myself extra credit when I get it right. It's fun to be able to predict it.
Totally.
I'd love to take a moment and pause and explain a little bit more about those archetypes, because I don't think everyone listening has heard of archetypes in that capacity. They might have heard about it from like a brand archetype or more of a marketing space of like, who are you? But the ones that you mentioned, I don't think everyone's quite as familiar with. Would you mind explaining some of those and how they allow you to go deeper and learn?
Yeah. So, okay. So we're kind of in the realm of thinking about consciousness, and so there's like, consciousness, the part of us that's aware, and that's more often than not, the part that we identify as like me. So that's like ego. And then underneath that, there's the unconscious. And so, the kind of classic illustration of that is the iceberg. And, the consciousness is like the tip of the iceberg, and the whole unconscious is what's underneath the water, all that math that you don't see.
Which and then 90%.
Yes, definitely. And then underneath that, there's the realm of the collective unconscious. And so the collective unconscious is like the psychological and human inheritance from time immemorial, So I really like the idea that originated with Jung, which is within us all, the 2 million-year-old man or woman or person. And just this idea that we have this, like that idea that we come in as blank slates kind of gets like slashed and burned when we really think about, this collective unconscious aspect that we all have the capacity to tap into.
How does that align with like genetic consciousness, or some of the things that we're starting to see research done on, like family traumas and traumas that you've inherited? Is that separate, or is that aligned with that subconscious element?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I kind of see, I see these like layers, where I think the bag that we're really dealing with in our own personal psyche is influenced by so many different things. And one is the collective, right? So like our inheritance as a human species, so that's that 2 million-year-old person. And then there's, our family of origin and our own, origin story. And then there's the epigenetics, which goes at least 3 generations back, they found. And, 3 generations back of like, if you've experienced trauma, then, that's still being lived out 3 generations. And I would argue it's like so much more because the ripple effect is massive. So, does that go into the unconscious? Of course, right? Because it's anything that we're not consciously relating to. And more often than not, that trauma is, we're born into a family system that might have trauma, embedded in it. And often that lives in the family's unconscious, and gets enacted in different ways. But I think we're also impacted. So that's like the lineage, right? And then we're also impacted by past lives. And that's more like of a soul contract, so that's less on the like genetic level and more on the soul level. And so I kind of like, in a way, it's like interesting, but then I'm like, you know what? In a way, none of it really matters.
Yeah.
In a way, when I get to that place, I'm like, you know what? What's here and now in your body in this moment? Because the body doesn't differentiate between real or imagined, nor does it differentiate around time. So if something happened to you and you were 2 years old, and especially if it was like an actual traumatic event that your body's holding on to, like that's always ever present, especially if it's in the field of relationship. Like if you sit down with a therapist that's, does somatic work, it's like when you kind of constellate that in the room, that's going to be up in the relationship, in whatever form. So it's like, okay, so what's here?
So to summarize it, right, we've got the human experience that's millions of years old. We have our family lineage, which generationally tied. We have past lives, and then whatever we've dealt with in our own life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like a lot, and and I think like, it's interesting. We like, whenever there's, you get a client that you're like, wow, we're really meant to work together. We always call it like a cosmic referral. And, I often get clients who are wired really sensitively.
Mhm.
And, I think in the world that we live in. And there's so much more awareness around that now. There's like the highly sensitive person test that you can take and like all this stuff to like really honor the different types of nervous systems that are out there. But our world is not wired for the highly sensitive. And there are such gifts of the highly sensitive, but I think more often than not, highly sensitive people grow up feeling very misunderstood, very ostracized, very sort of other.
Mhm.
So I get a lot of people like that in my practice. And I think that's partially because people who are highly sensitive and maybe don't know that or don't, aren't met with that type of understanding in their world suffer quite a bit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So then circling back to the original question of archetypes,
Yeah.
what are the archetypes and which layer do they, excuse me, kind of fit into?
Mm-hmm. So they live in the collective unconscious, like that's their realm. And they're in their dimension. And so archetypes are like patterns and energies that kind of constellate together that become identifiable. And
Mhm.
if you look cross culturally throughout time, you have these gods and goddesses and these cultures that have, a pantheon of gods and goddesses that kind of typologically are very similar, right?
Mhm.
But they're in these different, they have different cultural roots. And so that kind of just points to that we're kind of all swimming in the same matrix. And, this is obviously way before the internet and,
Yeah.
any sort of cross-continental global communication on the level that it is today. So the idea is that like these energies are already within us. And so when you kind of feel into the reality of the archetypes, you can see them everywhere. So let's see if I can give some examples. Like, okay, so it's kind of complex because it's like, it's gods and goddesses, but it's also like, you even like a narcissist or like a narcissistic personality, that's an archetype, and oftentimes that archetype you can then find the lineage and storyline and myth that, precedes it, but, or holds it.
Would it make sense to like think about, there's the Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And in storytelling, there's always like the villains and the heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And does it, for people listening who are hearing this all for the first time, like, is it safe to say that these archetypes are like the recurring characters that keep showing up? Like,
Yeah.
you mentioned the gods and goddesses, like Mars and Apollo. There's like a warrior person. And then there's like the guide person and there's the healer. Like would that, is that a kind of super simplification?
Thank you for landing me there. That's exactly right. It is. It's like these characters that show up kind of everywhere. Right. And I think Joseph Campbell was a really great sort of torch bearer of this idea that brought it really to the masses in a time where we probably really needed it. Yes, it is the characters that keep showing up. And so the important piece to remember is that within all these stories, all the characters are both within us and outside of us. So it's like that idea of as above, so below, as within, so without. So, the healer and the warrior and the witch and the, all these characters are inside of us. And it depends on, we might not have a very conscious relationship with our inner warrior. And, that might be a place to kind of breathe some life into if you find yourself like unable to say no or unable to speak up for yourself or unable to like get a project off the ground or, those types of things. But and then obviously, right, we see it going on outside of us, like you can kind of see the storyline living, even the plague, that's its own archetype, it's in stories throughout time.
So if I go back to school to get a PhD, it's probably going to be either in two places. One would be in archaeology, because anthropology, like I love all of that. Exactly what you said of like the recurring themes and patterns and connections between cultures and the why, I find fascinating. And the other one would be about why certain people succeed and others don't, which I actually think is the same question, just one's about people and the other's about cultures. And there's so many examples, and you highlighted it briefly when you were sharing before about there's so many moments in time when the exact same thing happened at the same time. And that's where the entire Ancient Aliens show on History Channel has some persuasive arguments, because like, well, how else did it happen? Like people weren't talking, there wasn't internet, there wasn't phones, they didn't have boats as far as we know. So it must have been an outside force that caused all of us to make the same piece of art or the same cultural jump. But then we have all this other proof of the shared consciousness of things like birds. Like my favorite example is the birds that were studied in the UK, who all learned how to open the milk bottle tops at the same time. And it happened so quickly, it couldn't have been like one watching the other. There was something else going on. So how, we talk often about how much of our brain we don't use and how much of our DNA we don't understand. This whole space of like what's left over, like all this power that we have and this knowledge that we have that like we literally do nothing with. It's like having a Ferrari that we just drive 5 miles an hour, and we only drive from like our house to like 1 block away. Like how exciting is it for you to like tap into that with people and like get people to realize that there's so much more than they're aware of?
Man, I mean, that's why I love doing this work. Because, when you talk about that, it's like, not only is there this unbelievable potential that, we have to tap into, but there's also an unbelievable capacity for destruction.
Yeah.
And that's when these sort of destructive shadow qualities are deeply repressed and suppressed, and then they kind of come out the back door and the side doors, through these sort of shadowy behaviors that if we kind of had conscious relationship with those things, and really those things do want, they really just want to be loved and understood and be told like, it's actually okay. It's actually normal that you feel that way, or there's nothing wrong with you, So, I think there's the part of potential, and then there's this part of like deep, deep, deep self-acceptance that's also really exciting to me. But yes, like, in that shadow realm, we also kind of put back there, any really positive quality that we were told implicitly or explicitly wasn't okay, So I know growing up, like I used to get, I kind of used to get it about being bossy.
Most girls did.
Yes, exactly. And so then if that goes into the shadow, if I say, okay, that's a part of me that like cannot come out, what goes with it, my voice, my power, my ability to lead, so yeah, when we really talk about like uncovering those things, they come up with a lot of energy too. It's like, oh my God, this energy that I didn't know I even had, I have conscious access to again. And that's really exciting, because ultimately, I'm really interested in like, yes, there's sort of like, if you're having an acute mental illness, kind of getting to a baseline level of like functionality. And then from there, there's that level of like fully, full expansion into, what I would say is really like following your soul's path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much junk to move out of the way before we can have that freedom. It's, whenever people are like, oh, I'm so tired and so drained. And I'm like, yeah, I can only imagine what powerful force inside of you're trying to like keep contained.
Yeah.
Because that's exhausting. It's like, it'd be like you trying to keep your 3-year-old still and quiet. Like that's exhausting. Just thinking about probably.
Yeah.
So you have this, fascinating work you're doing in therapy and getting to work with. I love these soul referrals. I think I'm going to borrow that for my own business too, because there are people that you just meet and you're like, of course we're supposed to work together. And then you make this transition into this sacred motherhood space. Were you like, did you see that transition coming before you were a mother, or was it really something that like got pushed through because of your own motherhood journey?
Yes. I think it was like this confluence of things where I was in grad school at the time when I got pregnant. Our pregnancy was, it was sort of like, we're not gonna not try, but we're not really trying. And then it just like happened and we're like, whoa, okay. So now we're like orienting to this reality. And so I was really like walking through each moment and each like shift along the way with such sort of curiosity. And, I was just kind of like studying it like a case study. And learning a lot, like researching a lot. And so it really was the experience of, becoming pregnant and becoming a mother that really opened me to this world of, the archetype of the mother, one of the biggest, most important archetypes out there, that was kind of constellating and moving through me that brought with it so many gifts and so much energy. And a lot of that energy went toward my own awakening around motherhood. And I mean, it's like, I think one of the biggest initiatory events you can have. And also looking around and feeling like I wanted to share it so deeply. And so, like shouting it from the rooftops, because I could see, I feel like, I've got this like Libra in my chart, and it's like this part of me that's always looking for justice and kind of looking at what's out of whack in the world. And, going into that field of motherhood and birth culture, got me in touch with like an immense amount of grief that around, I know for my lineage, I don't know how far back I'd have to go to find sort of like a land-based, unbroken kind of motherhood wisdom that comes down the line. All I know is that definitely got broken in my lineage. And I, so it leaves you having to sort of reinvent the wheel. And so I felt like that's what I was doing. I was like, okay, so I guess I am figuring out what everything means now, and what all this is to me. Cause I don't have the models,
and there's so many components to that
it's so big. It's big.
It's a primary archetype for a reason, right? Cause there's so many layers to motherhood. And do you feel like how our current society relates to and positions motherhood in our common culture that it hurts the sacred space of what motherhood is.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say that the Sacred Journey of Motherhood is a response to that. Because, because I was sort of orienting as it was happening, like I wasn't ready, like I didn't know a lot. I didn't have a lot of information. I wasn't steeping in like a community and culture of like, oh yeah, we know what mamas need. And, I didn't have that. And so, I really had to scramble a little bit. So it's almost like I went right into the conveyor belt model of like what you're supposed to do. And as soon as I did, I was like, this feels so off and wrong. Yeah. Like it feels like I'm in this sterile, well-lit, scary place when I feel like I should be in a red tent with other mamas who are like, there's oils and you know what I mean? Like wisdom's being shared and birth stories and all of this stuff that I was like, okay, now I feel like my feet are on the ground. Like, and I was just like hunting, I'm like, I am going to hunt down the wise ones that I am needing, and I found that through lots of books and people who have laid so much beautiful groundwork. I mean, I feel I have chills. It's like, I'm just thinking about all the women who came before me who are trying to piece back that lineage that got broken, with basically, the industrial age and modernization. And, it's a realm, I think, where you can see how damaged the relationship with the feminine has become more starkly than anything else. And these practices that are so kind of outmoded and outdated that are really slowly starting to change. But I just started to feel like an urgency, a deep urgency and a divine rage around what I was experiencing and seeing and hearing, where most of us relate to birth through the lens of Hollywood and the media, which is that birth is an emergency and that somebody else delivers your baby and that, you, as soon as you, start having contractions, you need to rush yourself to the hospital and, hand yourself over to somebody else to take care of you,
Yeah. You're incapable of figuring this out.
Yes. And so it brings me back to the 2 million-year-old person, it's like there is a 2 million-year-old woman inside of you that has been birthing for 2 million years.
By herself. Like, and well, and really in deep support of women, of other women who have done it, who have done it multiple times, who probably, helped their daughters and their granddaughters and, so it's like so steeped. And I think, for me, I experienced a lot of grief around that, that disconnect. And then, it's so isolating today.
It's so isolating.
It's, when you think about maybe since like the post World War II to today, like what motherhood looks like, it's this space where once you're in that space, like you can't do all these other things anymore. And then not only can you not do, career or contribution based things, you also can't lift anything. You can't eat certain foods. You have to stay over here. You have to be sterile. Like it's almost very similar to the, period shaming that exists in other places. And it's so crazy to, not only does it then tie into the lack of maternity care and support of all of that at a social society level, but as we talked about earlier, like there's so many layers to how once you're a mother, how your life shifts and you're not in control anymore. And it's not because of the baby.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, there's so many layers to that too, because part of the, broken lineage is that we don't live in community and in, a village type of formation anymore. And, that is so deeply isolating, especially in the early, postpartum time, but also throughout, that our physiology is wired to live in a village.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the 2 million-year-old piece. And so now we're in this modern time and our physiology is like, how do I be a whole village? I'm one person. And that's what we're trying to do as mothers, is we're trying to be a whole village for our family and our children. And we are all, I think I can say that, that we are all stretched really thin. And probably a lot of us are thinking like, I'm not cut out for this. I'm doing something wrong. Like I'm not enough. I'm not a good enough mother, like, because we're charged with being a whole village. There would be multiple women breastfeeding your child. And now it's like, no, you are the only one. And you are the one who's up with this, baby every night, until they figure out how to sleep. And then we have to sort of make these sacrifices where it's like, okay, well, this is what modern day motherhood is. It's like, instead of sort of adapting to the physiology of being human, we're trying to like smush human physiology into this like modern day container of, the clock and productivity and efficiency and all of this stuff that doesn't like, that our physiology doesn't give a fuck about.
Was separate and independent and the lone wolf approach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, you just gave me an aha moment for that I'm going to take back to my client sessions, because I spend so much time telling people it's okay to stay in their zone of genius. And now I know why, because they're trying to be a village, right? You just gave me that nugget. And then I go back and we have to build their team, which is their village, like make it all make sense. And because we think we have to be the village, and then it opens up into the whole space of, well, if somebody else is doing it, then why should I do it? Like it's already being done. And it's like, whatever you want to do, the world is broken. We need you to do it.
Yes. And just like having a business, I mean, there's so many parallels between having a business or a creative project and being a mother, which, I think we do have this mentality that like we're supposed to do it all. And if we're not doing it all, then we're failing in some way. And the reality
Especially
is
women.
like, yes. And I mean, we've gotten that passed down. Like I have countless people who tell me, well, my mom never had help, or like my mom was working and so there's this like guilt factor of like, how could I, I should be like a completely 100% self-sacrificing being and, just let myself shrivel up in the face of life. And I think in a way we're charged with reclaiming our space here, as mothers, because I think the voice of mothers is more often than not pretty invisible, and not often heard or seen or centered.
Well, it makes me think, we all panicked. Well, those of us who watched it, anyone who read or watched The Handmaid's Tale, all women were like, like petrified, because it seems so close to being a possibility. But to your point of what you just listed, how often are we already putting ourselves in that situation without somebody else forcing us to?
Yeah.
So you have this calling because you had your own experience where the conveyor belt was not going to cut it. What encouraged you to go from doing your own research to, I have to share this and guide other people back into this sacral, connected, stronger female space, motherhood space?
Yeah. Like with really anything that I've done, it comes from this really from myself first. It's like I have some big awakening around something, and then I see like what's going on in the world, and I'm like, if I have an awakening around it, but then feel so much more powerful and like I have more choice and agency and yeah, like just a sense of empowerment. Like, I get to make these choices. Then, I want that for other people. I want other people to feel that way,
Yeah.
and, and I hear, you just hear so many horror stories of things that happen. And, these normalized, abuses, really, I mean, I know that's a really big word, but these normalized abuses that happen in these contexts, whether it doesn't really matter whether it's in a hospital or not, but I have heard a lot of really horrible stories of, things that happen in the hospital, to women. But really, it's like, it's not even just that, it's the whole kind of like, I was going to say, like, it's like the paternalistic care model that, like, you need to hand yourself over to somebody else, and that somebody else needs to deliver your baby, when in reality and in truth, you are the only one who is delivering your baby. Maybe save if you're have an emergency and you need to have a C-section, but that is your birthright, is to have your own kind of experience and agency in that realm of birth. So yeah, I mean, it started with me and just all these ahas and learning and digging and then really deeply wanting to be an agent of change in the motherhood and birthing world. And I thought, if I'm so deeply needing this and craving it, then surely other people are too. Surely other people will resonate with wanting to connect back to like our roots, really as women and our birthright as human beings, that in our modern day, it's like we just can't see through it. It's so hard to see through the conditioning and the hypnosis, and so I just want to like take that sword and, slash through the trance and get to the deep wisdom and trust in our bodies, and not only trust in our bodies, but like reverence and honor of these bodies, and like get out of this ridiculous mentality of like how quickly you can bounce back and basically how quickly you can appear as though in every way, not just physically, but also in your life, that you did not just go through like the most massive transformation ever, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, financially, career-wise. It's like, let's pretend that didn't happen. Okay. Like moving on. I'm doing so well,
This is my new accessory. It's called a baby. And
Exactly.
That's like, I had the pleasure of living in Europe and living in Europe for a while. And they are light years ahead of the US in just giving what I would consider basic fundamental functionality to mothers. They are also working, Europe as a whole is also working on coming back to sacred motherhood spaces. But I just don't understand why in the US we think that when we are a human cow, that we have the capacity or should need to have the capacity to do anything else. Like, some people, every journey is so different, right? So like I'll work with clients about what their maternity plans look like. And I'm like, well, we know we can't plan it, but we can come up with A, B, and C options. And we'll keep throwing them out as they work or don't work. Because you don't know. Like, I've had friends who have had kids and they are the people who are like, I'm so bored. Give me something to do. Like, please. And I have others who are like stuck in a cocoon and need that space for a year or more. So it's so hard to predict. And everyone, I think, should have access and right to their path with that. But I just don't get like how like 6 weeks is ridiculous.
It's just like, it's just really sad.
Yeah. Especially when as a therapist, how many foundational things happen 0 to 1, 0 to 3, 0 to 5. And you're like,
Yeah.
if we can fix this part, like if we can let moms be moms, let alone dads, like I'm not even going to worry about throwing them into the picture yet, but like just moms. If just moms can be focused on that for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, what don't we have to deal with and clean up again later?
Yeah. I mean, there's some crazy statistic that is something like, I can't remember exactly what it is, but basically it's like this exorbitant amount of suicide, happens in the first year for women postpartum. And I'm like, yes, that makes perfect sense based off of the conditions that we're expected to we're not thriving. We're surviving. Like that's what we're doing, Yeah. Yeah. And then throw a pandemic on top of it and, we're really cooking,
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is too, though, it's like, it brings me back to that our whole system, like, I feel like it wouldn't even be a big enough change to give women the maternity leave that they so desperately need, which I think is at least a year. But it's like reorienting the whole way that we think and recognize that our future is dependent on the beings that these mothers are bringing through and their relationship with their mothers and their families. And that if we're not giving them the best chance, then we're not giving the whole collective the best chance of a future. And I think that's probably more important now than ever. And it just feels like our system to me just feels so archaic, and, what would it be like to live in a culture that was actually mother-centered and recognize the invisible psychological load and the unpaid work of mothers that adds up to at least like 3 full-time jobs, then on top of having a job for many of us.
Well, in any financial class you take, like when you're talking about family finances and literacy, any smart person will tell you that you need to have life insurance as a mother. And it's because of how expensive you are to replace. Because
That's so great.
You're doing daycare for who knows how many kids based on how many you have. So times that by your kids, number of kids. You're doing all the errands, you're cooking. And so all food goes through you. All cleaning is most likely going through you. You're being the chief family officer, organizing schedules and carpool and homework assignments and volunteering and like all the things. So to replace a mother is actually something crazy, like 10 times the income capacity than to replace a father who has a corporate job.
That's really interesting. That's such a great illustration of, yes, the unpaid work of mothering. That is so taken for granted. It's like, we don't even, it's like, and that's what's so interesting about this sort of like post-feminism space is like, I feel like we're in this really interesting place where culturally we almost like look down on being a stay-at-home mom, because we're supposed to be blah, blah, blah. And I hope we can move into this space, kind of like what you said of like, we all have different archetypes that live through us. And some of us are more like using all the agency we have in the world really deeply, feel fulfilled by the job of mother. And some are a little bit more oriented towards that, outer expression, that more like Athena and Artemis expression of the feminine. And neither are wrong, and both are so valid. But we just don't value these things the same in our culture,
No,
and it's sometimes it's like women on women is the worst. It's like the judgment.
Well, and it's because people who aren't women have told us that one is useless and weak and the other isn't.
Yeah.
And it's really, I think I have so many friends of mine who, when they became moms, had to go through an entire, like, breastfeeding is it one where people often have guilt. And, one of my best friends in college was like, this sucks. I hate it. I know that, I'm having to say no to all these benefits for my kid, but like, if I keep doing it, I will literally lose my mind.
Yeah.
And to your point, that's why they had like wet nurses and other people who could have provided that service.
Aunties and,
Yeah. So I think it's such an interesting time of looking at what, where the power for the feminine exists and how we can allow anyone to access whatever part of it they need, and how we can, to your point of just how do we acknowledge the fact that this is a huge part of society that we make look really like cute and hallmarky.
Yeah.
And it's so much more powerful and harder and critical than we classify it as.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we make everything look pretty cute and hallmarky. And, I feel like that's why I love the lens of depth psychology, is because I can see right through it into the like root system and into the soil where things have been composting for generations, and, giving nutrients to the root systems. But, yes, motherhood is definitely one of these things, and, gets lifted up on all the social medias that, this, everything has to be perfect. And it's just this sort of crushing sense of like, I can never be enough.
Yeah. And, I'm happy to see shifts moving away from the perfectionist kind of play in some spaces, especially in social media. Not enough yet, but it's like, when can we just talk about what it is? And even when we go look at the lens of motherhood more expanded, feminist movement, like we forgot that if women are going to not be at home, who's going to do all that work? Like, who's going to be daycare? Who's going to be transportation? Who's going to be elderly care? And we look at, if this is a personal perspective, but when I am evaluating the success we're doing and taking care of each other as a country, all the areas where we are blowing it right now are the ones that we did good at before, because there is a mom or a wife, or there was a feminine person taking care of it. And we forgot about that to-do list as a culture when we were like, yeah, sure, go to work. Who's gonna do the other stuff? I don't know.
It just kind of like, it sort of exemplifies our values as a culture. But you can see it so clearly, yes, our culture does not care about mothers, a little bit about children, but not really, and definitely not elders.
No, and the best, there's two things that trigger me a lot when it comes time for any political process in this country. One is when people say that they're for family values, and they don't talk about motherhood, maternity leave, daycare, education, like none of the things that a family actually needs to function, even like time off, vacation time, healthcare. And the other is when they, people use the term that we're pro-life. And I'm like, no, you're not. Like, are you going to commit the millions of dollars it takes to bring a healthy human into the world for the next 18 years? And most of the time they aren't. And I just wish we would be that, being the phrase pro-life taken out of the abortion conversation. Everyone should be pro-life. Like, pro-life is great. Like, we want people to live and be vibrant, and
what does that actually mean?
Yeah. And
our culture actually isn't like, it's not. Well, at least it's not pro it's not pro thriving, you know, it's like,
yeah,
it's like, you know,
we're pro prove it.
Yeah, that's really well put. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You want it, work for it. You want it, prove it. And it's like,
yeah.
To your point, when we were in a village system, if I had extra food, I'm not going to watch you starve living in the hut next to me. I'm just going to share it.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is,
And it's really, you know, because I've thought a lot about sort of this idea of revillaging, and it feels like there's a lot of layers to kind of weed through there. And one is the sort of fierce individualism that I know in my culture is very much, you know, lifted up and put on a pedestal. And, you know, then there's like, you know, decolonizing our psyches and our beings, you know, but our system is set up that it's like there's no more bandwidth for us to help our neighbor. You know, it's like I've exhausted all of my resources just trying to survive. And now I'm like supposed to show up for something or like somebody else right now. Like I don't even have the money, the time, the energy, you know, to do that. Whereas, you know, I know there's been all these really beautiful, you know, like you said, Europe is just so far ahead of us in so many ways. But, you know, in sort of the Northern European realm, you know, they're always doing something that's inspiring. But, you know, these communal living kind of spaces.
Like the daycare at the elderly center so they can interact together.
Yeah. I remember I saw this documentary where it's like this woman was a single mom, and it was sort of like a communal living, you know, they have their own space, but then there's like a kind of, you know, everybody cooks in a same place, but you can also have, anyway. And it's like the level of well-being is just so, so much more, than what you get when you're trying to be a fierce individual, you know, it's like, yes, it is. It's just like, it always brings me back to the physiology, you know, like we are wired to operate optimally in a certain way. And if we're not living our lives that way, we are not going to be operating optimally, period.
Well, we have the, we always know that it's not in alignment. Like even if we bury it, you're feeling like, like why there's no flow in this process. You know, even looking at it from a community development, like community planning perspective, the well-being of people who have walkability versus people who are in suburbs that you have to have a car, like just that shift, that anytime that we're not able to easily interact with people and do what we need to do, and every time that we make life a little bit harder for ourselves, we feel it in ways that we don't measure often. And I think one of the few positives of being in lockdown with the pandemic was that everyone stopped commuting. And the length of your commute is one of the biggest indicators of how happy you are and satisfied you are in life. Shorter commuters, the better, right? And I'm sure that you've been watching all the stats of how many mothers had to choose to give up their career because of the ripple effect of the pandemic, because all those jobs that they've been outsourcing couldn't get outsourced anymore.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And I mean, I'm so aware of, at least to the degree that I can be aware of, my privilege. And for me, the pandemic allowed me to not commute and work from home, which, you know, was an incredible blessing, because before, you know, pre-pandemic, and this is just my experience, but I think a lot of women can relate, which, like, I'm very lucky that I've had a I've been self-employed for a really long time. So my whole goal was like never to be part of the matrix. I'm like, it's can't, like, let's talk about not in alignment. Like I kind of tried and I was like, no, I just can't. But I would even go, to see a client or whatever it was. And I'd be gone it would be like this was like, postpartum. I was probably like under 8 months postpartum. But I would my breast would start to swell so much and I would start to be painful. And it's like, I couldn't stop thinking about my son. I would and I would start feeling really sad. And I'm like, I need to get home. And it was after like 3 hours was pushing it, So I had like really like a 3-hour window to be away and like survive, emotionally. And beyond that, I'm like, I have to be with my son. And it's like, I know that was biological, and so how much of our biology and physiology are we having to override in order to live in a modern world, and I feel really, it's interesting. Like I was like, if I make it breastfeeding past 6 months, like I'm going to be so stoked. It has been 3 years, almost 3 years, and we're still nursing. And, I say that, both in a, like, I'm like, oh my God, but also it's amazing. And I honestly, it would not be this way had the pandemic not happened. And I'm really grateful for the nursing piece and, for so many different reasons, but definitely one for his health and well-being and, immunity and all of that stuff. Yeah.
So what is the structure of how you help people? Like, do you have a membership? Do you have courses? How can women who are like, I need this sacral motherhood space, like what does it look like to be a part of that with you?
Yeah. So we kind of, we have different sort of levels of, commitment, but, what Becky and I both love the most is our one-on-one offering. We call it one-on-one mama support. And, we have focused traditionally more on like the pregnancy and birth space. But what I love about the one-on-one offering is that it can span the whole lifespan of motherhood. And it can be from preconception all the way through, to the parenting journey. And, with both of our kind of sensibilities, we're able to kind of support from these realms of like the psychospiritual to the actual like physiologic, birth and, wellness and care. And really just be guides and support systems and, space holders. And then we have three kind of tiers of our online course. One is just like the postpartum journey. And, it's like the health and wellness. There's healing your abdomen and abdominal wall through different yogic exercises. There's the education component. There's the ritual component. And then we have, that's like a pre-recorded journey. And then we have 2 tiers of the prenatal and postnatal. And that's, one that includes some one-on-one support and then one that's just completely self-paced. And those, it's ritual yoga. We talk about mythology, like actually birthing. We educate on, finding a provider, on, different ways of birthing. Happened. Yes, exactly. The physiologic side. Yeah. And then the psychospiritual, aspect. And, that includes journaling and, dream tending and all of this stuff.
What is dream tending?
So in general, dreams are really an important access point to the unconscious in general. It's so funny because people are like, oh, it's just hormones, why I'm dreaming so much. I'm like, it's because you're going through the most intense initiation of your life. So write your dreams down, like write those things down. And tending to the images. So, that could be bringing those in, that could be actually speaking to like, out loud or writing to, a character in the dream. That could be just kind of simply holding the images and noticing what comes up and what you feel. I find that it's really powerful to like take it into the relational space and not just have it in your head. Because I know for myself, I'm like, until I kind of am able to amplify the dream and kind of like live into it a little bit. Because, yes, it's a pathway into the unconscious. And in that way, it's a real kind of window and pathway into the soul. And that can be just really helpful as you process the big change and changes that are going on in that journey. And, what we're really wanting to create with Sacred Journey is more community. It's like we have this big kind of goal of this revillaging idea and, really coming together and circling with women and, having a ritual container for women. And whether that happens in person, which we want to have a component like that, where we actually meet in a space, and then, or in that sort of online community space, to really walk through the work together. So that's sort of an offering that's, in the gestational period right now.
Yeah. Well, I think we may know some ideas already, but what does what does the words powerful and ladies mean to you separately? And do they change? Does their definition change when they're put together?
Yeah, powerful feels like sort of this unleashing of your greatest life force. And it's funny, the ladies is an interesting one separately because it feels almost like the dainty version of talking about being a woman. And so it feels kind of proper. And I'm thinking of like, ladies having tea or something, but putting them together, it feels like getting more into like the meeting of minds, and the unleashing of our potential as women together. So that sort of that combination has a lot of potency to it.
I love how you just described it. And I may be borrowing that to update what it means.
Yeah.
Because it is like, to me, that's what it is, right? It's, I know that together we can solve so many big challenges that we face and things that need to be course corrected. We just need to know each other exist often.
Yes.
And
totally.
Once you know someone exists who shares a passion that you have, or, can clue you into something else, it can start to be the different characters so that you don't have to be all of them.
Yeah.
Like there's so much overwhelm right now about, we, hate what's happening in regarding, racism. We hate what's happening about the environment. We hate what's happening about our food system. Like there's all these things that women are distressed about. And it's like, well, fuck, how do we fix any of these things? Because they're all so big and they all require a lot of different shifts. But I really believe in this idea of if we're all taking one step each, but we're holding hands, it's a completely different experience. And I imagine that's what you feel with your community, because now all these women and mothers, the instant you're not alone, that's the first aha.
Yeah.
And then to have guides like you guys, it's like, oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, it is. It's like when you're isolated alone and your, source of wisdom is Google, it can really feel, it's so easy to go down the road of like, what am I doing? I must be awful at this. So in over my head, so overwhelmed. And to have someone sit across from you and just say like, you are not alone. All of us are up there, 3 o'clock in the morning with tears in our eyes, nursing our babies or, feeding our babies. And we're all alone together doing that, like it's like the universalness of the journey.
It sounds like a good excuse to have like a 3 a.m. Zoom check-in.
Right? Like everybody good? Everybody doing okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
We ask everybody on the podcast where they put themselves in the Powerful Lady scale. If 0 is average everyday human and 10 is the most powerful lady possible, where would you put yourself today, and where do you think you would put yourself on average?
Ooh, okay, so 1 through 10. Let's see. I'm gonna maybe like give myself a 6 or 7. It's funny because I was literally talking about this today because there's this like I can feel this kind of powerful matriarch within me that I have not fully grown into yet because I'm growing into her, but she feels like closer to the 10. My average, I don't know, my average is probably more like a 3 or 4. I don't know. It's a hard thing, but maybe that's not fair. Cause I would say even when I'm feeling like, more like inward and less vibrant and maybe even like really holding a lot of grief, I feel like there's still a lot of trust in that process and that's actually like really important and vital. So I would say like maybe that's my 3 or 4, but that might be still pretty powerful.
Yeah. I agree. So for everyone who is so interested in getting this support and being part of this community that you've created, where can they find you, sign up? Like what's next? Like where are all the ways and places they can become a part of this? Yeah.
So definitely sign up for our newsletter. Our website is the Sacred Journey of Motherhood.com. We have a monthly newsletter that goes out with just little dollop of wisdom and love and support geared towards mamas. My personal website is called yoursoulrising.love, and that has my psychotherapy and that whole kind of world of things. And then we're on Instagram at the Sacred Journey of Motherhood. That's probably our most, accessible way of connecting with us. And then my personal Instagram is at Molly Mitchell Hardt. And that's, kind of an amalgamation of all the things. It's probably an access point for everything, I would say. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know that the Powerful Ladies community is powerful. And often what we need is one request away. So I've been asking everyone this year, what is something that you are manifesting or wanting to create or need that we can ask the group and see who has it?
Wow. That is a really good question. I'm like, I have so many like, I feel like I'm seeing all these like pathways that I could go with this answer. I'll
tell you that if you think of more, you're welcome to email me and we'll get them out too.
Okay.
The manifestation doesn't stop in the podcast.
Okay. Oh, okay, good. Okay. So not as much pressure. It's like when you're blowing out your candles, like, what's that one thing you wish for? I'm like, just one thing.
I always default to like world peace.
Yeah, right. Like, what's the biggest thing? Yeah, I would say, I am a lot more comfortable in the world of like interpersonal work. And so the work of like creating a business that functions like, I had somebody once say, Elska, she's dear mama in my heart, say that a business that a mother runs needs to be like a washer machine. You need to be able to turn it on, and have it do its thing. So creating the washing machine, the functionality and the sort of automation, and really ultimately it's about finding the people who want and need what we are offering. So yeah, I would say that's a big part of it.
Well, the good news is that might be me to help you.
Yes. I feel that. I feel that.
That's my whole existence, is to help people have businesses that help them thrive, not ones that we can double your business without doubling your work. So how do we make the systems that you can just go and kill it only when you want to? Yes,
that's okay. So, I'll be calling you.
Yeah. And everyone else who's in that space too. Because I hear also in that request, opportunities to connect with more people who are in this space, who might offer something else, but not offer what you do, but still are in the space of mothers.
Yeah.
Because there's so many compatible projects and businesses and organizations that there's so many collaboration opportunities, I think also.
Yeah, that's a great, I would love to collaborate with folks for sure. Yeah.
I don't know what archetype that is, but I do see a theme in powerful women that we just want it to be easier. And we know that collaboration allows that to happen because we both want the village and the creative brain transferring and to share in the product that comes out at the end. So you have to let me know if there is that collaborator archetype, or maybe that's just called woman. I'm not sure. But it's there. And so I think that's one of my favorite things about this community is like people wanting to share, people wanting to collaborate, people wanting to help.
Yeah.
Because, if this can be a small digital village, then awesome.
Yes.
We need all the villages we can tap into right now.
Yeah. That's what it is in this modern day. It's like we create our villages this way, Yeah.
Well, I could talk to you for days, probably. I'm so glad that Anna recommended you and connected us. I'm so thankful that you were a yes to me and to everyone listening in this podcast. Truly has been a pleasure to, hear your wisdom and learn so much from you today. And thank you for the work that you do. It's in all three of your buckets. It's all equally important. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor.
All the links to connect with Molly and the Sacred Journey of Motherhood are in our show notes at thepowerfulladies.com. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening and leave us a rating and review. They're critical for podcast visibility. You can also leave any comments you have about the episode on Instagram at PowerfulLadies or at thepowerfulladies.com in the podcast episode, and we'll get back to you. If you're looking to connect directly with me, please visit karaduffy.com or Kara_Duffy on Instagram. But I'll be back next week with a brand new episode and an amazing new guest. Until then, I hope you're taking on being powerful in your life. Go be awesome and up to something you love.